Gators men's basketball team 3-point underdogs on the road this evening in Tuscaloosa, taking on the 7th-ranked Crimson Tide. To preview this one and a whole lot more, Neil Blackmon of Saturday Down South, maiden voyage on Helmets and Heels here on 1010XL 92.5 FM. Neil, appreciate you hopping on with us.
Hey, I appreciate you guys having me. I love the show.
Most appreciated, sir. Let's dive right into it. Florida, Alabama, top 10 showdown. Florida coming off of an impressive victory over Texas A&M, a double-digit victory on Saturday. Alabama loses at the buzzer to Tennessee. How do you believe, big picture, these two teams are approaching this second-to-last regular season game?
I think probably pretty similarly. Look, Alabama is very well situated to be a 1 seed. I would argue they control their own destiny in that respect. If they win their next 2 games, they would have probably the second best resume in the country behind Auburn. So, even with the loss to Tennessee, I think they're in control of their own destiny for NCAA tournament seeding. Florida, it has a little less control, but certainly if they win tonight against Alabama, they would have 2 of maybe the 5 most impressive wins on the season, the most impressive being at Auburn, and then they would win at Alabama. That would give them a very strong case for a 1 seed, assuming that, they didn't lose in the first game in Nashville. So I would imagine in a very similar approach from both programs. Obviously, the intangible aspects of tonight's game in Tuscaloosa, I think, favor Alabama immensely. Mark Sears, probably the greatest player in Alabama history, playing for the final time on his home floor, along with probably LeBaron Filan, Grant Nelson, and a couple other Alabama players that are likely that will either graduate or head to the NBA. That's a big emotional battle for Florida to go up against, and we saw last night what an emotional team can do on senior night when Texas A&M really manhandled Auburn. So, big challenge for Florida, but huge opportunity for both teams.
Neil, when we talk about that experience that Nate Oates is even bringing back when it comes to a Mark Seals and a Grant Roberts after their run last year, how does Florida in a game like tonight slow those guys down and kind of match the experience level of what Alabama was able to do last year and then now bringing it into what potentially is looking at the tournament?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. The good news for Florida is they should be confident playing Alabama. Last year Alabama made the run to the Final Four. Florida blew Alabama out twice in March a season ago, which seems strange to say given the Crimson Tide went to the Final Four. But, Mark Sears was not somebody Florida really contained in either game. I think he had 30 in one, 25 or 26 in the other, and Florida won both games very handily. Now, neither of those games were in Tuscaloosa, but, Florida had a 10-point lead in Tuscaloosa a season ago against, like you said, an Alabama team that had essentially the same core pieces, and Alabama was able to come back and beat Florida in overtime. But I think Florida will go up there confident. Obviously, they won at Auburn, so they're used to, they know they can compete in intimidating environments. And it'll just be a question of whether Florida can kind of corral all the additional pieces this Alabama team has. And what I mean by that is I think Alabama's backcourt is even deeper. You've heard a lot of attention rightly on Florida's backcourt and their guards being the best in the country. I would say Alabama's are the second best in the country with Sears, and not just Sears and Filan, who will be a lottery pick, but I think, Chris Youngblood gives them kind of a defensive stopper who can really shoot the ball. And then Aiden Holloway, the Auburn transfer, has exceeded my expectations for him. The guy's a walking bucket, shooting 42% from 3 in SEC play. So it's a lot for Florida to kind of handle. To beat Alabama, you have to outscore them. The good news is the Gators are certainly equipped to do that.
Neil, you saying Chris Youngblood just warms my heart because when we talk about the transfer portal, we always talk about it through this negative connotation. Having called his game at Kennesaw State when they came here to UNF, knowing, of course, he followed the late Amir Abdur-Rahim to South Florida, now gets to play for a top 10 team in Tuscaloosa. He is all that is good about the transfer portal. But I digress. Neil Blackmon joining us of Saturday Down South talking Gator hoops, SEC hoops. You can find him on X at NW Blackmon. You can also catch him on the Florida Basketball Hour podcast with Eric Fawcett. Let's talk a little bit more about the Gators rotation, Neil. Will Richard is shooting 50% from the floor, the hottest shooter arguably in the conference the last 2 weeks, which for Taylor and I, it's hilarious because I feel like, Taylor, every morning in our office, we have a Gator alum here at 1010XL who comes in, who will remain nameless, Graham Marsh, and laments about the nights in which Will Richard goes completely cold and then the next night goes for 30.
Yeah.
How do you deduce the nature of that backcourt for Florida, the highs, the lows? Is it a positive that even if someone like Richard goes cold, there's always somebody else who can step up, especially with Urban Klavzar now a part of the rotation?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great question, and you put it quite well. And by the way, great point on Chris Youngblood. And I look at this Florida team having the best backcourt in the country, and the core of it is 3 mid-major players who know not enough Power 6 conference and now Power 5 league teams offer scholarships to, right? The only one of them, of the 3, Elijah Martin, that's the core 3, Elijah Martin, Walter Clayton Jr., and Will Richard, that really had the option of going to a Power 5 school would have been Richard, and those offers came very late. So I think the thing about them is if one guy is super hot, there tends to be one guy that plays great on any particular night. Now, Saturday, they manhandle A&M a little bit, and, Elijah Martin had a big first half. Will Richard obviously was tremendous in kind of warding off the Aggies' comeback. And it was interesting because Walter Clayton was 3 for 13, right? He did not play well offensively. Now, I think he did some really nice things elsewhere. But that's kind of the flexibility this Florida team has. And like you said, with Urban Klavzar and obviously Denzel Aberdeen has had some big games, including their win at Auburn. So they have 5 different guys who on any particular night can really fill it up, and they each stress defenses in different ways. I mean, Clayton is, outside of Mark Sears, I think the best shot maker in college basketball in terms of just his ability to create his own look. And then I think, you have knockdown shooters like Klavzar and Richard, who, you mentioned his shooting percentages lately. He's shooting 42% in league play, which is tremendous. So lots of different ways that they can beat you. And that gives Florida a lot of flexibility in March, because not only do they become kind of our star player at a bad night proof because someone else will step up, but Florida has a lot of different ways that they can beat you, because we haven't even mentioned the front court flexibility they have, especially as Alex Kahn gets healthy.
Yeah, Neil, one of the things that sticks out to me is kind of the opposite situation that's happening, obviously, last year with Micah Handlockton getting hurt in the tournament, and now he's getting healthy and he's becoming kind of growing that role, getting that role back that he had last year that we saw drastically change what Florida was able to do. So what are your expectations with him, how much he is used in the tournament right away, and what can that even add to the momentum of getting him healthy just in time for this?
Yeah, it's a great question. We just saw it Saturday. I mean, I think he was really integral in defeating A&M, who isn't just a great rebounding team. They're a historically good rebounding team. Their KenPom rebounding percentage is the best in the KenPom era. And we saw them out-rebound Auburn 41-25 last night. So you get an idea of what they can do. And there were multiple rebounds in the second half where, it was Micah Handlockton and multiple Aggies, and Micah came down with the ball. I think that Florida's front court rotation is very matchup reliant. I think that this staff in particular, because they're so analytic, they're going to be looking at who and what lineups are effective in any particular game and roll with those guys. Ruben Chinyelu scored 19 and 13 in their win at LSU when multiple guys weren't available. And so they have a lot of confidence in him. I imagine he will continue to start. But, if you can get 15 to 20 minutes out of Micah Handlockton, he's not going to score, but he does so many other things that impact winning. And I think that's probably what you'll be looking at as we move into March Madness here.
Neil, as we get ready to wrap with you, 2-part question. Number 1, cap it for us. How many of the 16 teams in the SEC make the NCAA tournament when all is said and done on Selection Sunday? And second, do you think Florida gets back up to the 1 line?
So, I'll answer the second question first. I think if Florida wins tonight, they will get a 1 seed. It's difficult for me to see. Ole Miss is not a team that matches up particularly well with Florida. And again, it's one of those senior night type games that I think will be very challenging for Ole Miss, period. And I think Florida would then have it'd be hard for the committee to tell Florida, hey, we know you won at Auburn. We know you won at Alabama. We know you have 27 regular season wins. We're seeding you second. Good luck against Duke in the Elite Eight. I think that's a tough sell as a committee. So I think Florida would get a 1 seed if they win tonight. In terms of the SEC, I have written all year that I think they'll break the Big East record, which was 11 in 2011. I think they'll get 12 teams in. I know there are some folks that are politicking for 13. I just can't see it, especially because Texas and Oklahoma play this weekend. And I almost feel like the winner of that game can feel pretty good about where they are in terms of getting a bid, whereas the loser might be, into that second 4-out category where they have to make an extended run in the SEC tournament.
Which just not mind-numbing, by the way, Taylor. If Oklahoma wins that game, to Neil's point, I agree with him. I think they're in. They would have 5 conference wins. They would literally have gone, 5-13, Neil? 5-13 in conference play and still would be in the NCAA tournament.
That's insane. That speaks for a conference. Neil, I want to ask you real quick before we let you go too, because when you look at Florida's season this year and those 4 losses, the 3 of them 5, and 6 points, I think the Tennessee is kind of the outlier. And I wanted to originally ask maybe what the Vols did to get that, but I think more so the question is how did Todd Golden that Tennessee game happened, and then nothing close has been able to happen since then. Even when they are down early, they're able to come back and from massive deficits. What is Todd Golden doing to really allow that to happen?
Well, I think that the way they guard has been pretty consistent all year. I mean, even in that Tennessee game, Tennessee got to 64 points. The Vols made a few threes in the second half, but did not shoot a high percentage. Florida's defense has been really consistent. It's the most undiscussed thing among elite teams in college basketball. I stole that from Jay Billis, so I should attribute it to him. But I think the fact that Florida is 8th in the country in defensive efficiency, and you really just hear about how good they are at scoring, is a real story. And I think that's helped. I also think they're just mature. I mean, to Mia's point, one of the beautiful things about the portal is the opportunity and platform it gives some of these players who might not have otherwise had it. And I think Walter Clayton, Elijah Martin, who's been to a Final Four with Florida Atlantic, and Will Richard have embraced that. There's a level of maturity about this team. And so if they lose a game, they tend to respond. And, I expect Florida to go up to Alabama and be very competitive tonight, even if they aren't able to kind of overcome Mark Sears' senior night magic.
What's that stat, Neil? Something about, if you want to win the national championship, you need to be a KenPom top 25 team in offensive efficiency, defensive efficiency.
That's right.
I'm not saying, but I'm saying, Taylor Dahl, the numbers, they are aligning in the Florida Gators' favor. Hey, Mia here, and thanks so much for watching 1010XL. For even more great content like this, be sure to subscribe and like the 1010XL channel.